Okay, we are live on YouTube as well. Hey, Katie Dye, can you go to the closed captioning and the next two slides? Yeah, just have them up there, even though it's beforehand. Perfect.
Hi, Sam Kim. How are you?
Okay, I'm doing great.
Good to see you.
I've been in meetings, online meetings all day, so I'm kind of spent.
I hear ya. We have a lot of people coming in here. So if you're new, if you just want to go ahead and turn on your camera, maybe test out your audio.
Hello, everybody. Hope everyone doing well.
Hey, Johnell.
Either of the Katies, do we have a number for expected? I'm just trying to gauge if we've got most of the people on yet.
I don't have a sense of that. We didn't specifically ask, but we didn't have, I think we had one individual let us know that they weren't going to be able to make it.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hey, Greg, how you doing?
Doing well.
Mr. Michael Martin, tell us. Can you hear
Yes.
me? Yeah, Ed Washington here. I tell you, I thought you were my oldest son. For a moment, I'm not kidding you. He wears glasses, well, sometimes, and his head is like ours, you know. And I looked and I thought, what's Keith doing on this camera here? My goodness.
Well, that's it.
Me.
That sounds like a compliment.
It is.
I wear glasses.
Who's that?
Ed, this is Bill Prowse. I thought you were loading up the committee.
Yeah, how you doing, Bill?
Good, thanks, Ed. I thought you were loading up the committee.
Oh, no. I wouldn't know how to do that. But if I did, I would have to say I learned it from you.
Oh, sure. Okay. Backdoor politics, right?
Yeah, right. Hi, Lynn.
So if any of the members of the CAG are not promoted to panelists, please let us know by raising your hand and we'll get you promoted.
Good afternoon, everybody.
And Jonna Jarvis is wondering if we can see or hear her. I don't know if she's been invited to be a panelist, but Jana could potentially be in the waiting room here.
Okay, I got Jana.
There we go. Now I'm on. Thank you.
Of course.
Good afternoon. This is Jeffrey Temple. I don't see my name under the panelist dropdown unless I'm perhaps missing it.
We just got you promoted, Jeffrey. Appreciate your engagement today.
Thank you.
Whoever put together the summary of the last meeting did a very good job. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I'll pass that along to my team.
Okay, is consensus among the parties that we can go ahead and begin?
And again, before you do that, Lynn, let's just, if anyone is waiting to be promoted as a panelist, please go ahead and raise your hand icon and we'll promote you. Thanks, Lynn.
All right, well, in the interest of time, I think we will go ahead and get started. First of all, a warm welcome to everyone. We will not, as a matter of protocol, be doing individual introductions at every meeting just because of the time constraints. And hopefully there will be a time when we can all be together and it will allow for a little more informal getting to know each other. We do have 2 new members that I believe are on the call today that people have not met, representing the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Ryan Webb, project manager for the Confederated Tribes. Can you wave if you're on? I can only see about half of us. And then I believe we have an Oregon Transit representative, Victor Cesar. Victor, are you on? If you're on, if you could just give us a wave, that would be terrific. A warm welcome to everyone on the call. We have a lot to get through today. We'll do our best to give you a roadmap and to kind of change it up to keep interest alive. I would ask that at this, I'll be introducing Ed Washington, my co-chair from the Oregon side of the river, and Greg Johnson, program administrator for the entire project. And they will be starting us off with some welcoming comments. So Ed, if you would take it away, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lynn. It's a pleasure to see all of you, including those of you that I don't see, but welcome to the meeting. And I think this is going to be an exciting committee. I'm really looking forward to working with all of you, but I think this meeting is a very, very special meeting for a reason that's really not related to the bridge. We just want all of you to make sure that we get that snow this evening that we've been promised. And if we don't, we're going to blame you. But it's a pleasure to have you all back again. And I really look forward to working with you and helping in any way that I can. So without further ado, Lynn, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thank you. And I'm going to just ever so smoothly pass it on to our program administrator, Greg Johnson. Greg.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I'm going to be very brief in my remarks so we can get on to the business. But we have been moving very quickly and with a purpose. And we want to make sure that all you folks are comfortable with where we're going. So please let us know if there are things that we haven't filled you in on. We did the combined meeting with DAG on a Saturday, which I thought went tremendously well. But once again, if there are things you need to know and understand better, please reach out to my team and we will make sure that you have all the information you need. So thank you and let's get to business.
Thank you, Ed. And with that, I'm sorry, thank you, Greg. And with that, Johnell, will you give us some of your advice for navigating the technical aspects of this?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lynn, and good afternoon, the Community Advisory Group. Just as a reminder, we have available closed captions, both in English as well in Spanish. English closed captions are available within the Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow this link below to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window. Next slide, please. If you want to access a closed caption at the bottom middle of your screen, you should see a menu that looks like this. If you can't see the menu, hover over your sort of taskbar there and it should populate. Then click on the CC icon and a separate window with captions will appear. Next slide. Just a few tips for those doing this via the webinar. First of all, we want to just thank you for joining us today. Please join us by audio or by phone or computer, not both. There always creates some feedback if we have both on. We encourage all of the panelists to turn on your video if you are comfortable with doing that. Obviously, in this virtual environment, we want to stay as connected as we possibly can in a meeting setting. Please keep your audio on mute when not speaking, again, to limit the level of feedback. If you experience any technical difficulties, please reach out to any of the program staff, either via email or email will probably be the best today. Next slide. A reminder to our public, there will be an opportunity for public input towards the tail end of the meeting. To submit comment after the meeting, you may fill out the comment form on the program website, or email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org, info@interstatebridge.org, with CAG public comment in the subject line. Or you may call 360-859-0494 Washington, or 503-897-9218 for Oregon, or you may also reach us at an 800 number at 188-503-6735, and state when leaving a message that this is in response to CAG public comment in your message. All comments received after the meeting will be distributed to the CAG members prior to their next meeting. So just a couple of housekeeping items there. And with that, next slide, please. Back to you, Lynn.
Thank you. This is our roadmap for today's meeting. We are amidst the welcome. We will then move to CAG meeting agreements. We've already talked about that some, but hope to finalize. We'll be addressing IBR, a vision for the future. We'll be presenting our community engagement plan and seeking input and guidance. So please stay tuned and be ready to contribute there. We will have time for public comment near the end of our time together, and then we'll do a wrap up and next steps. Next slide, please. These are the deliverables from today's meeting. So we talked about what we were going to be doing, but these are the kind of meaty parts of the meeting together today. So we're going to discuss the public meeting protocol, and we will be addressing in a future work session how we keep each other safe in this environment. We're going to talk about CAG meeting agreements and operating norms, and our re-emphasizing our shared engagement commitment. We're going to learn and understand the program area as defined by the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project. And then, as I mentioned previously, provide input on the community engagement approach. Next slide, please. Now it's my opportunity to introduce Kellyanne Amico, who is our public information officer for the project, and she has some information that will be helpful to all of us. Kellyanne?
Thank you so much, Lynn. I appreciate it. And just a point of clarification, my last name is Amico. It's like amigo, but with a C. It's Italian. So just wanted to throw that out there. So the media, they're getting very interested in this program, and for good reason. And so before I get into the nuts and bolts of what I wanted to share with you, I wanted to thank you again for all participating in this very important program. We all know that it's critical to the success of the program and achieving a bridge solution that serves the community for generations to come. So a big part of that is how we engage with the media and share with them what is happening. So I have received some interest in having conversations with members of the Community Advisory Group and the Equity Advisory Group. And so if you are to get a phone call directly or inquiry directly from the news media, it is your prerogative as to if you would like to respond. I do want to let you know that we are always here to support you. So I would urge you to get their name and phone number and their email address and find out the name of the outlet, and always feel free to contact me. My email address is right there, kellyanne.amico@interstatebridge.org. So let me share a few thoughts about reporters. They're not your enemy. They're not your friend. They're getting the news. They're trying to do their job, and their job is to get the story, get sound bites and quotes. Remember that they are in an environment where they are constantly faced with negative news. So sometimes they might come across negatively, but that's not who they are. They're just trying to get the story. So don't take any kind of interaction with them personally. one thing that I'd like to share is what we have learned is there are several C's to news, right? I like to break it down just to 3 C's: consequential, controversial, and curious. Consequential, they all speak for themselves, but if any news angle has the impact to the target audience for the news outlet, it's consequential. Controversial, same thing. Curious, if there's something just a little bit different about a story, that's when they're going to be inquiring as well. So as a volunteer, where do you come in? You are a volunteer for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. And if you do interact with the news media, it's important to clarify that your opinions are your own and do not represent the official position of the program. When you find yourself in an interview situation, listen to what the questions are, and feel free to take the time you need to respond to the question. If you don't understand the question or the intent behind a question, just ask the reporter to rephrase the question. They're perfectly happy to do that. Like I said, they're trying to get the story. And always feel free to take another approach to answering a question. If you feel like you didn't get it right the first time, ask for another opportunity to rephrase the response to the question. Be yourself, be honest. When you find yourself in an interview situation, be sure to avoid speculation. It's not an opportunity to debate. Our reporter friends, they're neutral journalists. And if they are talking, don't interrupt them. These are just common sense pieces, but sometimes, we find ourselves in interactions with people that we don't know, journalists, and it's just a good reminder. So there are also some pieces with regard to social media. But first, let me ask, are there any questions that any of you have about this piece so far? If you do have questions, feel free to put them into chat. I can respond in an email afterward, whatever works best for you. Okay, so let's get into social media protocol. A few things to keep in mind. Again, your views are your own. So that's the disclaimer right up front. They don't necessarily reflect the views of the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. Be respectful in your interactions of others' opinions and avoid engaging in polarizing debate. Accuracy, if you do put data out there as it relates to the program, just be sure your facts are accurate and don't offer assumptions or predictions or any kind of hearsay. Transparency is another important piece. If you post information about the program, be transparent again in your role as a volunteer. And the meetings that we're in here, these are all public meetings. Everything that is said in these meetings, as you know, is in a public forum. Offline conversations, however, with your volunteer peers is private. So what that means is any kind of private interactions you have about, personal information, that needs to stay to yourself. But that pretty much summarizes what I wanted to share with you. Again, any questions or team, any thoughts about how I can further provide context? No? Okay. Well, I am going to go dark and I'm going to listen in. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Ed, do you want to share a little bit about maybe framing kind of our next section, which is on the community advisory group kind of meeting agreements as we get into that piece? I was hoping you might have just a couple things that you might want to share as we get started. You're on mute.
The agreements is will be focused on how we manage our business and how we manage the meetings, and how we obviously respect each other, and all of those kinds of things. I don't really think I have to tell you about that. I mean, respect, I think, is the utmost. And if you have disagreement with someone, it shouldn't be a public matter. And just listen to each other. We've got a lot of work to do. And the only way it's going to get done is by us all working together. So I'm just encouraging all of us, and I don't have any doubts about that. A lot of you I know, some of you I don't know, but let's just roll with it. And you got a disagreement, let's not do it publicly. We can always get together and learn how to agree without necessarily disagreeing. So, but I say I'm not worried about you all. You're all experienced. You've all done these kinds of things before. And let's just make sure that we do this to the best of our ability, because we're doing a job not for ourselves at all. It's for the people in the neighborhoods and the community that we represent. And so let's not forget that. Thank you very much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ed. Well, we showed you at the very first meeting that we had together kind of our initial list of meeting agreements. And then we raced through what each of those agreements meant to us. We wanted to allow for enough time to actually have a conversation, and we weren't able to make that happen. And so instead of starting this meeting with a lot of talking to you, we wanted to be able to provide an opportunity to allow you to talk to us. And so this is the list that we started with. You might recall, those that were able to participate in our orientation, that we had some really good dialogue around what does consensus mean? How do we use consensus to be able to create an inclusive climate? So a lot of that really kind of helps us to understand our meeting agreements and how we show up for each other and how we work together, how we offer and gift our support and our respect. We don't all know each other, and there are a lot of individuals that are on this call right now that are involved in the program and that are on our community advisory group. And so while I want to be able to kind of go through each of these, I also want to ensure there's enough time for us to hear from you. So one of the things that occurred to Johnell and I and Katie, and we really started to think about what kinds of commitments we as a program team can also offer to you. So in addition to the meeting agreements and the words that are on the screen right now, there are some things that we felt like were important for us to be able to ensure that you knew we were paying attention to and that we could commit to you. And all of this commitment, how we work together, how we come to recommendations, would all be included in a couple-page document that we're really hoping is the outcome of some dialogue, of some input that we've heard from you. And this commitment to each other would be something that we would want you to feel so confident that you can live with these values and the way we work together, that you might even be willing to actually sign your name. Which I find that when you're willing to sign your name, you kind of maybe think about it a little bit differently than just a bit of a nod and a thumbs up. And so that's really what we're hoping to do in this space right now. As you think about these meeting agreements, you've had them in your packet. This is the second time you've seen them. There's a 2-page document that we sent out as well that just kind of explains a little bit about what we mean when we use these words. I thought that I would share a little bit in terms of what we know that we can commit to you. And some of those are a bit logistical. Some of them are just really important so that you know that you can count on us. The first is we will always send you an agenda 1 week in advance. We will send you any materials that we need you to review and be ready to provide us with feedback and comments on. Most often, we will want to introduce something to you and then we will send it to you afterwards. You can think about it, and then we'll talk about it again at the next meeting. So when we are asking you in this space to react to something or to give us your feedback, we don't expect you to be prepared to do that. We're just looking for any reaction based on what you've heard and what you've seen. And you're going to have a little bit of some presentation today where you might have some reactions, and we'd love to hear that. We also are going to ensure on our agendas that you know what to expect in the future next 2 meetings. So we tried to model that in the agenda that you received, so you kind of can start to think about, okay, we're here right now and we're headed to these next couple topics in the next meetings. And I might have some questions about what that looks like. We want to ensure there's space for listening. We've really tried to make sure those first 2 meetings were about giving you so much background and information, and we appreciated 7 hours of your time helping us to ensure that you had a good foundation moving forward. But there will continually be this real balance of trying to share information and solicit input from you and be able to listen. So we're paying attention to that balance. We will continue to ask you, if you have follow-up questions, email us so that we can, as a team, be able to ensure that we're getting back to you and we're responsive. And we will make a commitment to ensure that you know where your input and recommendations are needed. So as I think you might have heard me mention before, we've got some really phenomenal and smart engineers on the program. So we are not asking our community advisory group to weigh in on some real detailed engineering. We are asking you to weigh in on some really important things, like what we're going to get into really in a lot of depth at our next meeting, which is, what is the purpose of this program? We have a good place where we're starting. Are these still the problems that we need to address as a program? And what are some values that we might look at in terms of how we solve the problems that we've defined? And what's our vision for what this program looks like? So those would be areas that we would say your voice matters. You can influence this program by sharing your thoughts around this particular piece. I also want to say this is not a decision-making advisory group, and we've talked about that a little bit, but it's important that we are staying transparent and authentic with you so that we can show you where community engagement and where your voice does matter. I think the last thing that I just want to say before I just pause and offer the opportunity to listen is that this is a program that is about replacing a bridge. It's about steel and concrete, but it's also about the humans that are a part of this group that help represent other humans that are connecting between 2 states, 2 communities. And it's that piece that we really want to make sure that we're continuing to pause and listen for your input and your counsel as we continue to move this program forward. So with that, this is the list of meeting agreements. I'm just going to go ahead and read the words on the screen here, but I'm really interested in folks raising their hand and providing us some input. The next slide is going to ask you 2 fundamental questions. And the first one is, are we missing anything from this list of meeting agreements? And secondly, is there concurrence that we would adopt these within an overall kind of team commitment or charter? So the first meeting agreement we've talked about is put relationships first. And I tried to kind of mention a little bit about how we're doing that and the way we're communicating with you and committing to show up. Keeping focused on our common goal. Noticing the power dynamics in the room. Creating a space for multiple truths and norms. Being kind and brave. Practicing examining our racially biased systems and processes, looking for opportunities to learn, and inquiry and responsiveness. With that, Katie, do you want to flip to the next slide, which has kind of the group discussion? And I am going to ask Katie to take that slide down. We can certainly pull up the slide that has the meeting agreements on it, but I want to create an opportunity for us to have a dialogue. If anyone feels like there's anything missing that we should consider adding, I'd love to hear your input. Okay.
Can I just blurt out?
Sure. And then Kevin.
All right, so this is Sam Kim, community member. I really like these agreements. I think this is a great start, but you know, we're going to be spending a lot of time together. So I would say let's enjoy this process, because I think this is something that's bigger than each of us. And I think through these agreements, I will commit to being innovative, creative, inclusive. I think that they're all kind of captured there. But I think we should also, look at the power of the experience and the skills, the knowledge that's being brought to this group. And I think we should leverage that. I know some of you because I know you personally, or I know you because I read about you in the paper, or you introduce yourself very eloquently. I think this is a very powerful group. And so let's take advantage of that. Let's build on each other. And, let's make sure that this is an accomplishment that we will be proud of. So let's not make this stressful and, conflict ridden. Let's make this, constructive and supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Kevin?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I agree with the enjoying the process part, and thanks for letting me ask a question. I guess my question is twofold, both maybe somewhat technical. One, I'd encourage us to create space to be able to say, I may not agree with that, but I'm okay with the decision, or I'll go along with the decision. And so that's part of the consensus building process. And two, just curious, how do we know we've reached consensus on something? Have we talked about that?
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Johnell, do you want to weigh in on that, or Lynn or Ed? I don't know that we've actually defined that.
Well, I think, so again, the committee will recall that we'll be using consensus cards. Green signifies that there's agreement. Yellow signifies that you still have a question before you are able to reach agreement. And then of course, red is you don't have agreement and need further conversation. And so that will be a key indicator for us. Again, the role of consensus is not that we 100% agree with every single thing, but that your voices and perspectives were heard, and to the degree that we can reach compromise, that's going to be critically important. Also, I will ask our administrator, Greg Johnson, to weigh in on this as well. Greg, do you want to weigh in?
So, Johnell, you did an excellent job of describing the process, but consensus at its heart is being empathetic, being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes by listening closely, by asking questions, and by being willing to move your position. If you're a person who loves to stake out a position and stay with it, that's not a consensus building position. You can put your position out, but you've got to be willing to listen to others who say, yeah, we like your position, but how about this? So the cards will be great indicators, but once again, we'll know when we see heads shaking and saying, yeah, this is how we can move this issue forward.
Thanks, Greg. Marcus?
Yeah, I had to put it into the chat, but I'm understanding from Brent that is disallowed. So my question was about the power dynamics. One of your bullets was about power dynamics. And my question was, simply, I thought we were all equals on this panel and all perspectives were respected. So what issue would there be with power dynamics? Nobody on this panel has more power than the other, do they?
No, I think that's a really good point, Marcus. I think, Greg, you'd like to respond.
Yeah, and I can tackle that question. We are a team of equals where nobody's voice supersedes anybody else's. So everybody has a legitimate background that they bring to this. and it's unique and it is there. So that doesn't diminish it, nor does it put it above other folks. So Marcus, you're absolutely right. We are an egalitarian organization where everybody's voices are equal.
Bill. Green. Did you want to share any comments? You're on mute.
I am there. I am unmuted now. Sorry. I really enjoyed hearing from all of you, but I really look forward to meeting all of you eventually, but also just learning from each and every one of you as we move through this, because I think that's the power of this group dynamic, is we learn of each other, we listen to each other. I like Sam's perspective on that. That's kind of where I was hearing from Sam and Greg. I agree. You know, we all have a voice, and the power though is the understanding and listening, I think. And so, and then I'll say I like Michael Kelly's background picture too. So that's all I had.
Thank you, Bill. Tom Hickey.
I just wanted to address the power dynamics question that Marcus had. I feel like that that comment or that issue is directed at people like me who come to this as a white male, having grown up in a situation where I presume that my voice is the one that needs to be heard. And so it's a reminder to me and people like me to not let that be. So that's how I take it.
Thank you for your comment, Tom.
And Tom, I can say that statement was not pointed at any one individual. But once again, we do have communities that have been underrepresented and unheard in previous decision-making for large infrastructure projects. So we want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. And whether you're white male, whether your gender is different, those are things that don't make a difference in this setting. So put your ideas on the table, and everyone will have a chance to shake their head yes, or add to your idea or subtract from it. So not pointed at any one individual or group, just a way to say everybody has equal say.
I do appreciate your perspective. And I think, you know, there are a lot of dynamics with a community advisory group like this beyond what Greg even mentioned. There are some that are representing organizations, and there are some that are representing their individual perspective. And so it's important that we're also recognizing and being clear about both those voices are equal and need to be heard. Okay, we've got a couple other folks, Tom Gentry, Irina, Michael, Sam. So let's go with Tom Gentry first.
I'm not sure if this is a proper place, but I see where Brent has said we're not going to use the chat anymore, even though Lynn, one of the co-chairs, is using it. So my question becomes, how do we find out information? For example, in the last information that perhaps most of the group already knows. In the last one, I put in the question on the chat asking about the changes in transportation since the strike at the port. Y'all may all know that, but it seems like to me that everything I've been told, that was a major thing, and I would like to know about it. So if it's not going to the entire group and we're not going to use a chat, do we use email at the end of the meeting or what?
That's a great comment. And that actually is a good segue into just mentioning that we're collecting a lot of questions, which is fantastic. I want to make sure that everyone understands there's not a question that shouldn't be asked. We may not have an answer yet, but we're going to get back to you and let you know. We have a matrix of all those questions, and Katie Belliconi will be pushing that out to this group so that you know, here's a question. We've got a really great technical team that's working with us to be able to answer the questions. And like I said, some questions may not have an answer yet. They may need to go through a bit of a process, but you're gonna know that we are tracking all of those questions. So yes, Brent mentioned the chat function. Because this is a public meeting, we wanna make sure that we are living those values of transparency. And so what we will try to make sure that we're doing on a regular basis as we're getting started, we have quite a few questions that have come in, is making sure that you see that list of questions ahead of time. That will also be available, and then the status of where we are in answering those questions. So great
So
comment,
how do we
Tom.
get the questions to you?
Email would be great.
Okay.
So we'll make sure that everyone has that email address. It allows us to make sure that it's easy to sort and we don't miss any. Thanks, Tom. Okay, I think Irina.
This is Irina Phillips, and I wanted to comment about the power dynamics. There are like 30 people who are on this committee. So I was thinking power dynamics is like 29 agree on an issue and in consensus, and one person continues to push their concern and their agenda and doing it in circles and circles and circles. So when this is the case, this is kind of like the person doesn't feel the power dynamics of the room. That's it. Thank you.
That's a good example. Thank you, Irina. Okay, Michael, and then Sam.
Thank you. Real briefly, I just wanted to make a suggestion that I think one thing we could do, and maybe this is what's planned, but it hasn't been, in my view, or clearly articulated, when we're trying to make a decision, when we are, exhibiting where there's agreement and where there isn't, it would be very helpful, and I think establish confidence if we actually measured that. So it wasn't clear to me that we are going to do that, but I think then we would understand where are we, and then more clearly march forward. So I think it really would help the process and help everyone else sort of recognize that, especially with some having screens off and the like. But anyway, just it's more of a comment than a question.
Good comment, Michael. Thank you. Sam?
All right, I'll be real quick. I appreciated Mr. Hickey's indicating what he said about power dynamics. I don't think it's targeted towards anyone, but it could be targeted towards us extroverts, right? We tend to talk a lot. We tend to dominate conversations, and so I will try to keep my comments short, and I'll try to talk less. So that's my commitment.
Seeing a green card. Yeah, I think that's a really good comment. And I think I mentioned in the first meeting that we need to pay close attention to those that need to talk to think and those that need to think to talk. So it's just important to make sure there's enough space in the room for both ways of thinking. So, all right, did I miss anyone? This has been a great conversation. We will capture everything that we've heard. And our next step will be to take the feedback that we've gotten from you in the jam boards, the small group sessions that we had at the orientation, and incorporate that into a few pages that we will send out to you for you to review and be ready to respond to at our next meeting. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's one of those things that will be sent to you so you have enough time to think about it so that when we come together, we can discuss it. And if we're ready to say, we agree, then we'll move forward. If not, then we'll get your feedback and we'll come back to the next meeting. So, okay, I think we're good. Lynn.
Well, I'm excited to get to introduce the next thing, which is a video. If you're like me, you love Zoom meetings and you wish you could have longer Zoom meetings with more people and less participation. Okay, maybe not. But we do have a video that we're going to show that is going to reflect the current conditions around the Interstate Bridge and the program area. If times were different, we'd be on a field trip. We'd be walking, we'd be looking, we'd be taking pictures and taking pictures with each other. But that is not the case. That being said, some of you I know see the bridge every day and some of you see it probably now out your windows, but not all of us have that same experience. And so this video is intended to replace the fact that we can't be there in person with information. So with that, I think we can roll.
About a half-mile wide and 30 feet deep, the Columbia River defines the region's geography and draws the border between Vancouver, Washington, and Portland, Oregon. For millennia, indigenous peoples have lived along the shores and routinely travel the Columbia River to trade and practice usual and accustomed traditions. The Columbia is a major navigation route for the region and provides opportunities for recreation and the commercial maritime industry. The Interstate Bridge is a main crossing over the river. Beyond the concrete, steel, and traffic of the bridge lie scenic views, a thriving ecosystem, and a reflection of our region's rich history. As we proceed upriver towards the Interstate Bridge, we see the site of the 1948 Vanport flood. Here, the Columbia River levee was installed after the Vanport flood as a floodplain barrier. Today we see Delta Park, the Expo Center, Hagen Island, and its floating home community. On the North Shore, we have the Vancouver Waterfront Park, historic Fort Vancouver, and Clark College. This area in particular contains numerous burial sites and other sacred archaeological resources. The northbound section of the Interstate Bridge opened in 1917. It was the first automobile bridge across the river between Washington and Oregon. There was a 5-cent toll per vehicle or horse to cross the 38-foot wide roadway. The bridge became part of Interstate 5 when it was built in 1957. Along with the new interstate system came a second parallel bridge which opened to traffic in 1958. Currently, over 130,000 vehicles cross the Interstate Bridge each day. The bridge provides a critical connection between Oregon and Washington, supporting local jobs and families, and providing a vital trade route for regional, national, and international economies. However, travelers crossing the bridge experience up to 11 hours of congestion each day, with exhaust from stop-and-go traffic and idling vehicles affecting the air quality of neighboring communities. The Interstate Bridge lifts for tall ships, large barges, and routine maintenance an average of 300 to 400 times per year. This is one of the only stoplights for vehicles traveling on Interstate 5 between Mexico and Canada. The only way on and off Hagen Island is by way of the Interstate Bridge. The Hagen Island interchange is often clogged with traffic congestion. Pearson Field and Portland International Airport are in close proximity to the existing bridge, with planes flying over daily. The bridge lift towers extend into Pearson Field airspace. About 1 mile downriver from the Interstate Bridge, freight trains cross the rail bridge, carrying goods to and through the region. The rail line runs along the north shore of the Columbia River and crosses over I-5 at the northern end of the bridge. Under the river, the current bridge foundations are comprised of timber piles set in sandy soil. In a major earthquake, the bridge would likely be substantially damaged, potentially beyond repair. Over the river, narrow lanes, no shoulders, poor sight distance on and near the bridge, frequent bridge lifts, and substandard ramp merging and diverging contribute to an increase in vehicle crashes. The bridge's narrow pedestrian and bicycle path, low railing heights, and lack of dedicated pathways on either side of the bridge impede safe travel for people walking, biking, and rolling. There are limited transit options across the bridge. Currently, Max Light Rail ends at the Expo Center in North Portland, and Vancouver's westbound bus rapid transit ends at Turtle Place. Although C-Tran provides weekday express and regional bus service over the bridge, these have limited frequency and are subject to the same traffic congestion as personal vehicles when crossing the bridge. Replacing the aging interstate bridge across the Columbia River with a modern, seismically resilient, multimodal structure that provides improved mobility for people, goods, and services is a high priority for Oregon and Washington. We are committed to finding a modern connection for our growing community that will improve our transportation system now and for the future. Learn more at interstatebridge.org.
Thank you. And for those of you who don't recognize, our own program administrator, Greg Johnson, narrated.
Over 1 million people call Rhode Island home. People whose needs are as diverse as they are. WSP has been
Lynn, are you still on?
I am. I was just going to say, we are an absolutely flawless program. Think Academy Awards and you've got us. But Johnell, I think this is your cue.
Yeah, well, hopefully if I did have cue music, that would not be it. But nicely done, Greg, on the voiceover. So now we have an opportunity of having a deeper conversation. Just to contextualize this, what's critically important as we think about the replacement structure that will eventually replace the bridge, it's important for us to remember that what we're talking about is how this structure fits within our built environment. And to kind of help us lead that discussion today, we have Nolan Leinhart, who's a principal with ZGF Architects, to really have a robust presentation as well as a discussion. So with that, I am turning it over to Nolan.
Thank you, Johnell. I love that video, and you'll see some similar themes in this presentation that we've put together. As a preview, I'll let you know that a lot of the graphics in this presentation were prepared during work that we did for the Columbia River Crossing project. So some of the drawings that you'll see look like a design of a project. And so these may not be the outcome of this project, but they're intended to help understand what is the landscape that we're passing through, the community assets and amenities. And so while some of those sketches may not reflect where this effort is going, they're still helpful for providing context. So if you go to the next slide, this is the context image that you'd find on the Interstate Bridge Replacement website. And it's the area that the freeway is passing through and identifying some of the major landmarks and sub areas through which it will pass through. But it's also helpful to take a step back and think about the significance of a place like this. And so the next slide zooms way back out to the entire west coast of North America and thinks about what is the meaning of this place in the context of this bigger scale. And if you click to the next, it's rare that we have this kind of an intersection of freight and commerce and urbanism and natural resources and a marine highway going east to west, as we have the freeway highway that's going all the way from Mexico to Canada. And so thinking about it at this scale and the fact that it does occur only really in two other places, in the, Sacramento and then in Vancouver, BC with the Fraser River, I think helps to put in context what a rare and unique thing this is. It obviously brings with it challenges. It brings with us a lot of benefits and amenities associated with the role of this facility and the places that it serves. Next. And it's been evolving together, this area, for over 60 years. Introduction of the Port of Portland, the freeway system itself, and of course, light rail and transit systems that run in this corridor. Next. I'm from Portland, and those of us from Portland sometimes view this area that this bridge is in as the northern edge of our city. And I think it is important, and in fact, planning efforts like the Council of Regional Area Governments in 1975 have envisioned the whole region, including Clark County and beyond. And when you do that, you realize actually this node, this intersection of the Columbia River and I-5 is kind of the center of our region. And it certainly is a center in terms of natural resources and commerce. And so that's really the attitude that we should be taking with this is think about the ways in which it's a center. And if we'll click to the next, we really wanted to break down and just refamiliarize ourselves and you with all of the various resources that we have, natural resources, open space, the various destinations and urban centers. Many of us will be familiar with some of these. Very few of us would be familiar with all of them, but they're all really served by the regional road network, by the local street connections, by the transit, by the bike and pathways. And so it's worth spending some time thinking about those. Next. So obviously natural resources and systems in this area are extremely diverse and numerous, and they are sensitive. And obviously when we're flying through at 65 miles an hour, it can be easy to overlook the richness of that. But whether it be the Columbia Slough, the North Portland Harbor, the Columbia River, and all the supporting wetlands and systems around there, there's really quite a lot here. And it is our responsibility as we think about design of public facilities infrastructure in this area to take care of that. Next. As mentioned previously, there are a lot of parks and open spaces. In fact, 3,500 acres of connected parks and open space on both sides of the river. And many of these are not simply neighborhood parks and open spaces, although they are that serve the immediate communities around them, but many of them are regional serving parks and open spaces that draw people and serve people throughout our region and beyond. Next. There are urban centers throughout this corridor, and those are very important. They are places of employment, they are places of residence, they are gathering places, and you know, again, it's really important that we think about the way that this full network serves those places, connects those places, is used by the people who live there, visit there, and work there. Next. And then finally, in addition to the parks and open spaces, there are a number of other destinations. And as previously mentioned, they not only serve the people in the immediate vicinity, they do serve people throughout the region. And in the case of PIR or Delta Park, they can even be places where people come from, you know, many states away for a sporting event or some kind of competition. And so in that sense, this bridge represents a gateway to the state of Washington, it represents a gateway to the state of Oregon, and a gateway to the Northwest for a lot of the people who are using these facilities. Next. So that's sort of the high level overview of these intersecting systems and these resources and these assets that we have in our community that are served by this system. Next. We want to make sure that we also honor that there is social and cultural history that we need to acknowledge and celebrate, and really help to tell this story. And so as a project like this is rebuilt, it's important to think about how the original I-5 came to be, and what are some of the areas and history of those areas and the people who were impacted. In this case, the Vanport flood. The video addressed this a little bit, is one example. The next is the Portland Assembly Center, which many of us will know as Expo, where Japanese Americans were interned and prepared for time in some camps during World War II. And so these are both the kinds of stories that are critical to the history of this place and this space, and that we want to make sure that we acknowledge and honor as we think about what the future might be. Next. So as we think about what is it that connects all of these places and these amenities, we came up with the idea of the ladder and the landscape. So what is the ladder? Next. Again, these are illustrations from the previous program. And at a very simple level, that program could be broken down into three systems: the transit system, the multi-use path and bike system, and then a system of roadways. And there's sort of the main roadway, and then there's a number of supportive roadways that intersect with the program. Some of them are local streets that go under or over the freeway, and they're used not just to access that facility, but also to provide connectivity to these communities around it. Next. And of course, those roadways connect, and pathways and multi-use pathways connect to others in the area. And so the fact that there is some consistent north-south connection, and then there are a number of places where there are east-west pathways that cross over or under the freeway, we thought of this analogy of considering it a ladder. It's a bit of a funny looking ladder, but it's persisted as a useful metaphor for us. And it was important for us to think about, if you think of this as a ladder, and if you think of it as a network of local street connections and local surface connections, what is it today? What might it be in the future? Where is it complete and connected? And where might it have gaps? And how are the potential components of this program that may arrive in the future contributing to those gaps, helping to make it a more complete and connected system? Next. So back 10 years ago, we spent some time around all of these connection points, really touring around the kind of visit that Lynn was describing, taking photographs of some of these areas, the important nodes, the important streets, the important pathways and places, and then really just breaking that down into its component parts to make sure that we understood it, and understood, therefore, what the value of different components of the program might be. And so the next is multi-use path connections, some of which connect to, again, broader regional systems, including the 40-mile loop. And these are incomplete in this area. And so it may not be that the program solves all these problems, but it is helpful to understand what are the networks that we're plugging into, so that we can understand, again, what is the value that could be contributed. And then finally, Denver Avenue, which at one time was the major north-south spine, it continues as a local street connection today, and we spent some time looking at its conditions, conditions where it is either contiguous or incontiguous for pedestrians or cyclists, and of course, it will intersect with this program area as well. Next. So in addition to the local street network and pedestrians and bike pathways, the other thing that connects this whole area really is the landscape. And by landscape, we mean both the natural and naturally occurring landscape system, as well as the landscape that is adjacent to I-5 and today, and that might be adjacent to I-5 in the future with this program, since it will take apart parts of the freeway that exists and put parts of it back together. And so we wanted to make sure that we're looking at all these layers and how they relate to one another, since in the end, there does need to be a large comprehensive idea about how all these things fit together and serve one another. Next. This is what that sort of looks like in concept, that you have these islands of urbanism and amenity. You have a roadway system that's connecting them, and then you have the landscape system that's connecting them. So next. This was an illustration of those layers on top of one another. And of course, this is how we think of urban places, and the places that we pass through is as connected, right? Not as broken out systems, even though they're also easy to understand as those connected systems. But it's helpful to pull these images up to really look into them and understand them effectively. Next. And then next again. And then these were some images of precedent projects where there's major infrastructure and landscape connections around them, and thinking about how do you design so that the edge conditions are not simply, I'm on the edge of a freeway, but maybe complementing Delta Park or Marshall Park, engaging and strengthening those connections under or over the freeway, and thereby really strengthening the ways that the east and the west sides of our communities are connected to one another. Next. And so we spent some time thinking specifically about what that might mean in this area. Next. And so one more next. Again, with the caveat that all of these are illustrations of the design that we were working with 10 years ago. We did some sketches of those relationships between East and West. So this is a section looking through this area that the photograph is in and understanding the relationship between Delta Park and the freeway and the wetlands. Next. This is an eye-level sketch looking at one of the fields associated with Delta Park and thinking about whether there could be multi-use path connections that are integrated, potentially that could get delivered associated with the program. Next, we did some thinking about the way that the program would interface with the North Portland Harbor and what the relationship would be between the structures passing over it and the waterway and banks along the sides of it. Next. And of course, to the degree that there are infrastructure elements on Hagen Island, thinking about what might be the pedestrian and bicycle connections. The old program had a multi-use path that was running alongside and needed to get down and then get back up in Hagen Island. And so thinking about how you do that and how that creates an inviting and welcoming condition is important. Next. And then here in Vancouver, adjacent to the reserve, thinking about what that edge condition of the freeway might be and how it relates to that important historic resource. Next. This was a sketch generated as part of some of our conversations with the Urban Design Advisory Group, looking at some ways to strengthen connections between downtown Vancouver and some of those areas to the east, creating more connections and creating higher quality connections, including a concept at the time which involved a partial freeway lid adjacent to Evergreen Boulevard. Next. And so again, these are the ways in which that weaved landscape and the surface street connections might be thought of as really providing an opportunity to take a facility that sometimes feels like it may be pulling the east and west sides of our communities and our region apart, and thinking about how might we use this opportunity to pull them together. And the final drawing was also from those Urban Design Advisory Group conversations on the next slide. That really thinks about that and recognizes that the impact of this project really can extend well beyond it to the east and the west, and strengthening those connections and supporting the places in which we live, work, play, and visit. So intended to be a teaser, get your mind thinking about what the possibilities might be. And I hope it's helpful and happy to take any questions.
See, we have Tom. We'll have Tom first. And just a reminder to committee members, if you could use your hand raised feature, and I will call on folks as I see them. So we'll have Tom and then we'll have Ashton.
Nolan, that seems like there's been a lot of work there, which brings me to our last meeting. We asked the question whether a tunnel was still being considered. From your presentation, I would think that even though they told us yes, that it's actually a no. And my second question is, I live on Hagen Island. Where is North Hagen Island Park? I don't know that place.
So to interject for the first question, I'll ask Greg to respond to that. And then for the second question, Nolan, if you could respond to that, that would be great. So Greg.
So regarding the viability of a tunnel as a alternative, it is still a potential alternative. We are, as we are putting together purpose and need, we will be looking at a number of different things. Our team is digging into it because early on we've heard from folks who are advocating for a submerged tube tunnel, or immersed tube tunnel rather, that would take the place of a bridge. So we're looking at that and looking through some of the pluses and minuses of that type of scenario. But once again, we will have to get to purpose and need before any final decision is made and screening criteria that will tell us whether an immersed tube tunnel is a reasonable alternative to move forward.
And Mr. Gentry, I missed the name of the park that you mentioned. Can you repeat that?
Where is North Hayden Island Park?
North Hayden Island Park. I believe that may have been a discussion about some of the land that would be underneath the existing or around the existing bridge and what might happen to that once the new bridge is built, that there was an opportunity to potentially create a new park. So that again was an idea that was presented as part of the last program, may or may not be part of conversations going forward. And I should
there are 2 hotels there that you would have to buy out.
This was referring to the land that's covered currently by the existing bridge. So the freeway right of way underneath that space. And I should have mentioned, we very much think of this content as a work in progress. So if there are things that people see that we've missed, one of the opportunities in talking with you is to add to it, make it better, so that it really is representative of the way that all of you see this region.
Great. Next we have Ashton, and then we'll have Tom Hickey, and then Martha Wiley. So Ashton.
Real quick on the tunnel idea, I push back just a little bit on that because we are in the seismic zone, Cascadian subduction zone. I don't think that's wise, and I don't know what the bedrock conditions are for that area. One thing I am thinking about in terms of this these connections is at Hayden Island, what type of connections are we putting there for folks who are using mobility devices? Is it going to be elevator? Something I would prioritize over ramps, just because of the nature of it. Another thing that I have a question around is if we're including a dedicated walking lane on the bridge, will there be bench seating at least every quarter mile for folks who do need to take a stop? And that's where I'll stop off there, Johnell.
Great, thanks, Greg. I'm going to punt those to you if you could respond.
Yeah. So in regards to the tunnel, there's been immersed tube tunnels that have been built in seismically active areas. So the technology can withstand that. But once again, there are numerous other challenges to that, such as sensitive archaeological areas that would have to be disturbed. So we're looking through all of that. No final decision has been reached yet, but probably sometime early this summer, we will be putting that forward for the group to look at and tell you what we found. Regarding the facilities for non-motorized or for active transportation, yeah, those decisions are not made yet. We're going to have some of our friends from the cycling community and from the walking community make sure that they have a voice in whatever facility we build is going to be appropriate and be attractive to have people use it and get out of their vehicles for those one-person trips.
Thank you, Greg. I am the walking advocate. I'm Oregon Walks, so appreciate it. Thank you.
So we will be bringing in some broader folks to do a deep dive. You will be a part of that deep dive that we do on what amenities would any path look like across the bridge.
You know, Johnell, I might just add that we also really want to set the context that right now we're in that initial phase of purpose and need. So what we asked Nolan to do is really provide us that urban context that had been utilized before as just a good foundation for us to all orient ourselves around. So what we don't want to give any impression of here is that we're showing you a picture of something that's ready. We're showing you a picture to provide good background as we're able to start to build that foundation together, which very much is about setting purpose and need and vision and values, which is this phase that we're in, and that Johnell will talk a little bit about in terms of our community engagement. But I just want to make sure that there's we are a long ways away from being really intentional about some of those details that have even come up so far. So just want to kind of reset.
Absolutely, I get that. I have a construction background. I know we're in the design phase. I was just wanting to put forth some ideas that we can think about early on in the design phase so we can incorporate them throughout. Understood.
It's great feedback. Thank you, Ashton. I just thought, oh gosh, I want to make sure everybody, and Nolan isn't getting questions he's not able to answer at this point, given this was a presentation he did about 10, 15 years ago. So,
yeah, and in fact, I would just add that you are the first group to receive this presentation. So, and it's helpful conversation. So we're going to have Tom Hickey, Martha, and then we'll have Bill IL, and then we'll have Rondali. So go ahead, Tom Hickey.
Okay. When we look at the previous work of the Columbia River Crossing team and the proposals from back then, how has the recent development, or how have recent construction development changed or provided constraints to our thinking? I'm thinking specifically about the Vancouver waterfront work and whether that is putting limitations on possibilities that were not there before.
And that's one of the key questions that we're going to be asking all of the groups to think about. What has changed from the last planning study till now? What different things have cropped up, whether it's built infrastructure, whether it's attitudes, whether it's changing habits? What has cropped up that is different from then to now? And that's going to help drive purpose and need.
Martha?
Yeah, I have two questions that are, I don't know, maybe they're too technical, but in your presentation, Greg, you said that the bridge currently is allowing 130,000 trips per day. Can you talk about how that compares to what it was designed to handle? And then also, when we're looking at some kind of a replacement, what lifespan are we looking at? Is it going to last for another 100 years or what?
So let me tackle the easy question first. Modern bridge design nowadays are looking at a minimum of 75 years of useful life. So with appropriate maintenance, those things can last well into the 100-year because of newer, better materials, better construction methods. So we are looking at probably a 100-year bridge that, or a 100-year facility that we're going to construct. So the original bridge across the river was built for horse and trolley traffic. So it's hard to discern what they were thinking at the time it was built. They built a very sturdy bridge for the time. Anything that has lasted 102 years is outstanding engineering. But once again, a lot of the things that we take for granted on a modern facility aren't there. So things that cause congestion on the bridge, such as the close spacing of interchanges, the lack of auxiliary lanes for folks to smoothly enter and exit out of the through flow of traffic. So those are all things that that limit capacity and add to the congestion that we currently see on the bridge.
Bill?
Oh, thank you, Johnell. Yeah, Nolan, I wanted to just offer some thoughts from the tribal perspective, but historic perspective. All of the aspects of what we see in that ladder existed 100 years before the bridge, or 1,000 years before the bridge. Those trade routes were there for a long, long time. And the Hudson's Bay Company built Fort Vancouver in 1824. And in 1824, they moved from the mouth of the Columbia, where the Northwest Company was located, to Vancouver to take advantage of a trade route that ran to Puget Sound. And that was called the Cowlitz Trail. The Cowlitz Corridor is basically it follows the route of the I-5 from Portland to Olympia. There's actually a landmark sign in Tumwater that marks the northern terminus of the Cowlitz Trail. So just an aspect. I think I really like that the way the video was put together to offer that context. And I just wanted to add that for your thinking. And I like the idea of the elevators on each side. Those are great. We've used those in Tacoma for some of our crossings as well. The cover there in Vancouver, I thought that was a great idea when my brother served on the UDAG, and that was a great idea. I don't know what the community's thinking in Vancouver, but I think it's a great asset to think about, and how that could really enhance the downtown Vancouver. It's the synergy, I think, that's the great aspect of this whole project. Thanks, you.
Bill. Thank you.
We'll have Randali, and then we'll have Jenna.
Thank you. It's Randali. Thank you for your time. So one of the issues that we know the region is facing is a growing number of houseless folks who are taking refuge in various areas like parks or near ridges of highway exits, etc. And I was just wondering what plans or ongoing discussions are there with either the city of Vancouver and Portland about potential spaces for affordable housing, or spaces where folks can set up, a safe space for themselves that is in a way that doesn't negatively impact the traffic flow or the environment, the neighborhood, or the safety of the folks. Thank you.
So I'll take a stab at that question. We recognize the houseless population in the corridor, and we know as we are planning this program that's an issue that we are going to have to address. We cannot coldly and heartlessly just come in and bulldoze and move people without giving them other options. So that's an issue that we're going to talk about, and what that means for this program. Right now, we're gonna talk to folks like yourselves, like this group, about what ideas do you have that may be beneficial to help answer that question.
We'll have Jenna, and then we'll have Bill Prowse, and then we'll wrap up with Sherry, and then we'll need to move on to the next item. So Jenna.
Thank you. I just wanted to reference back to a comment Bill just made about this area being a major trade route. I think we need to recognize that it is still a major trade route, and that there's a great amount of freight that moves between Mexico and Canada, or Canada and Mexico, and they're running down I-5. And so the concept of building a tunnel is just simply not workable from a freight perspective. There's too many products that can't be carried through a long tunnel like that. And so I'm hoping that we won't spend a lot of time having that discussion.
So it's an issue that we do have to answer, because it's a viable alternative to this. We can't prematurely shut the door on that. So we will answer it, but that will be part of any analysis that is done, is the movement of those type of loads that are prohibited.
Hazardous material loads, which are pretty easy. I mean, automotive batteries are a hazardous materials load. So
things that are prohibited in long tunnels. We will be having that discussion as part of our deeper dive into is an immersed tube tunnel an answer.
Thank you.
We'll have Sherry and then Diana. I think saw your hand as well, and so we'll wrap up with Diana. So Sherry and Diana.
Was it me? Oh, I thought Bill.
Oh, Bill. Sorry, Bill. Did I miss you?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead, Bill.
I was asked to unmute, so I unmuted. I just wanted, it's a quick question. Hopefully, Noel or Greg can answer. And we're talking about the bridge and some of the designs and what's been done in the last 10 years. I'm assuming that I want to say a baseline or a given is that we're talking about the freeway that I'll say ends at Hagen Island and starts in Vancouver. The freeway itself is going to be part of that bridge. So the start and the stop of the bridge is going to be basically over the same place where this bridge is currently. Is that a given, or is there a place to move it? Or, I mean, it's because as you take into consideration some of the habitats, the current structures, the new things that are going on here in Hayden Meadows, where I work, are being built right now with transit trucking companies and that kind of thing. There's going to be lots of trucks going through here and accessing that highway gets onto the bridge to go north from here or south from over there. So as the givens, what are the baseline givens of what the architecture of this new bridge will use?
So we recognize that we're going to be in the footprint of I-5, that we are not shifting the freeway in any significant way. One thing that will be looked at is, should we bend the bridge so when it comes to maintaining traffic, can we build one half of the new bridge, shift traffic over, demolish the old bridge, and then build the remainder of it? So that's a constructability question that needs to be answered, but that's just a bowing out of the bridge, out of the initial alignment that is there.
Like they did with Selwood Bridge.
Yeah. Other than that, we're pretty much locked into staying into our footprint because of the, like you said, the built environment and the natural environment that exists right next to the facility that we're talking about.
Great.
Nolan, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
No, I think that's exactly right.
So we'll have Sherry and then we'll have Diana and then we'll move on to the next item. So Sherry.
Thank you. Just kind of wondering if there has been in the past or will be going forward some robust analysis on the impact to traffic with alternative transportation modes. I would imagine now it's the majority of it is truck and car passenger traffic. So if we're considering other alternatives, walking, biking, transit, and those types of things, what kind of analysis is going to be done? And then I have another question. I don't know if you can answer this, but just because I'm participating on another task force with FEMA, is there a contingency plan should something happen before we get to construction on this bridge?
So the issue of are we looking at other modes? One of the things that potentially will get people out of their vehicle for the one occupancy trips is to have an attractive alternative. So we're going to look at those things and what can make people say, yeah, I can take transit, or yeah, I can hop on my bike, or I can walk across this bridge. So those are things we're going to look at. Both Metro as well as RTC, they have models that can help predict what future travel patterns will look like. So we will be leaning on those traffic modelers at those organizations to help us talk about what the future of traffic and what the future of of transportation will look like for the area. Regarding whether there is a FEMA plan for if there is a damage to this bridge, the only alternative truly is I-205. And I-205 carries right now approximately 165 to 170,000 vehicles per day. Now, if you add 130 onto that, you're going to have an untenable situation. That's part of the pressure to move this thing forward, is the ramifications to the economy, the local economy and the state economies of both states if we don't take action and an earthquake disables the I-5 bridge.
Diana?
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering, as we're thinking about options that are on the table, and maybe this is a little too early in the conversation here, but is there an evaluation happening around congestion pricing first to manage the demand of traffic on the bridge, and then build consequently, I guess, afterwards? And what kind of planning is happening around congestion pricing?
So in Oregon, the Office of Urban Mobility is looking at congestion pricing both on I-205 and I-5. And that's an issue that's currently on their front burner. So we are looking at it for what that may mean for traffic coming to the I-5 bridge. So we have one side of the river that is tremendously interested. One side that seems to be less so, but if it were to happen, that's got to be a decision that Washington has to make, that Vancouver has to make, that yes, we're going to do congestion pricing on the Washington side of the bridge. Oregon has already started that conversation and has moved forward. We can react to it, but that's an issue that is beyond our scope on this project.
Okay, thank you, Nolan, for that great presentation, and thanks to the whole committee for a great dialogue. This is exactly the type of feedback that we need in order to strengthen the project. So now we are going to shift to a conversation about our community engagement. If someone could go ahead and populate those slides, that would be terrific. And so you should have received via email some information about community engagement. For those of you who participated in the orientation that we had a few Saturdays ago, this will come as sort of a reminder. We'll have opportunities of kind of digesting this in just a moment. But just you'll recall that our core components of our community engagement really centers around equity, diversity, accessibility, transparency, and inclusion. And so that's our bellwether, if you will, or the watermark that we are really wanting to live up to as we interact with the communities on both sides of the river. Next slide, please. So our key community engagement goals include seeking feedback from a diverse range of stakeholders, including underrepresented and or underserved populations into our engagement. We also refer to communities as historically marginalized communities. For us to embrace innovation, we want to identify new ways of interacting and engaging folks. We realize that we are in the midst of a global pandemic. The way in which we would have interacted with our community is very different given the technology constraints we have. But also we can't be too reliant on technology because we're very mindful of the digital divide that we have. And so we're going to need your help sort of navigating this terrain. We want to minimize barriers to engagement. We want to demonstrate accountability through transparency and feedback. We realize, particularly for our historically marginalized communities, for many of the reasons that we sort of highlighted on the video, there's a trust deficit that we have with a number of communities. And so how do we overcome some of that deficit in order that we build new trust, but that we tap into the great counsel that so many of our communities have. That we establish credibility and trust with stakeholders and the community, and that we provide opportunities to meaningfully shape the program work. This is not a pre-baked effort. All of you have been invited around this table to kind of help shape what this looks like for our community. And in order that we do that, we have to tap into the whole community. Next slide, please. Just a real high level of timeline. As Greg indicated, we are in the throes right now of having conversations around purpose and need, vision and values. And that will be the work that this committee, as well as the Equity Advisory Committee, Equity Advisory Group, as well as the Executive Steering Group will be rolling the sleeves on, really kind of coming up with purpose and need for the project, as well as what are our community visions and values associated with this project. That, of course, will feed into screening criteria that will be used for developing an initial range of alternatives. And so that's the connection. Purpose and need, vision and values all go into coming up with a screening criteria that will be used for alternatives. Then we will go into a process of narrowing the range of alternatives, concluding in environmental and design work and construction. So between now and the winter, we're going to be really, really busy kind of rolling up our sleeves on these concepts. Underneath, you'll see the blue arrow, which indicates community engagement. This just is to signify that community engagement is going to be throughout our whole process. And we really believe in really advancing the notion of an equity-centered community engagement process. And we invite you to hold us accountable to that as well. If we are falling short on our commitments, we need to hear that from this committee, as well as our Equity Advisory Committee. So that will result in a number of engagement events, both kicking off in February. We'll have more in the summer, and then of course in the fall. Next slide, please. So when we asked all of you via email, and we're going to have an opportunity here in a second to continue to do more of this work, we really posed two questions, which the first is, how do we encourage engagement with broad representation of our community? We want to both hit the grassroots as well as the grass tops and all of those folks in between. And so we really need your good thinking and help and your expertise in helping us ensure that our strategies are really thorough. The next question is, what outreach strategies and approaches have you seen work well? Many of you are with community-based organizations or other organizations, and you do a fair amount of outreach. We want to know what tactics and strategies have worked well for you, so that we can kind of borrow some of those efforts. So next slide, please. So we are going to open up, maybe Katie, if you can, or Lisa, if you can kind of explain sort of how the Jamboard will work. We're going to ask you two questions. The first is, as I indicated, how do we encourage engagement with broad representation of our community? And the second is, they move so quickly. The second is, what outreach strategies and approaches have you seen work well? So Lisa, could you give a little commentary in terms of how the Jamboard will work?
Sure. So those that participated in the orientation had the opportunity to take this link that was sent out and just start to type some comments. Now, we've had a really good dialogue already today, and we have to make sure that we're also allowing for voices that maybe haven't been heard to share maybe your thinking. If you've already inserted a comment, awesome. If you have an additional comment, let us know. This isn't the only time we're going to ask you about community engagement. We do want to make sure that we have a pretty hard stop here at 5:45 so that we can allow for public comment. So in the few minutes that we have, if there is feedback or answers to either of those two questions, we'd love to hear from you. And Katie will start to add sticky notes to the board, and we'll put them on here. We'll also make sure you have access to that board. So if you think of something later tonight or maybe over the weekend, you can add to it anytime.
Great. So
right,
why don't we go ahead and open it up? And if, again, you could indicate if you have a comment via the hand raise feature, we're going to record your feedback, and we really look forward to hearing your feedback. So who wants to kick us off with either of the questions? Okay, I see that Victor, welcome, Victor.
Hello. I was just going to say being flexible with time, knowing that, evening meetings don't work for everyone. Working in economic development, that's not an ideal time for business owners. So, hosting a morning social and then having an evening social might, get to a broader range of people.
That's a great feedback, being mindful of sort of what time we are having community engagement activities, really meeting the community where they are. That's terrific. Thank you. We have Ashton, and then we have Martha.
Working through community-based organizations to do open houses. I think that is very important because we reach out particularly to non-native English-speaking communities, immigrant and refugee communities that often do not have voices at this table. And I would ask that when we do present to those communities, we put things in plain English so that we can translate easily so that they can understand as well. And also infographics are a plus.
That's terrific. Really relying on our community-based organizations to kind of help us do that outreach. Great. We have Martha and then Jasmine. Martha?
Sorry, it took me a minute to figure out how to unmute. One of the sticky notes there says identify the communities we want to reach, and I would like to make sure that I would like to ask that we try to reach the houseless community. I don't know how that would work, but they will be affected, and I think if there's some way we could get in touch with them or involve them, I think that would be great. And then the other community I think is important is the physically disabled. I'm looking at wheelchair provider or wheelchair users crossing that bridge. And I just think that there might be some other things that we could talk to them about, but I just don't know how best to reach those two communities. That's all.
Great. Thank you for that feedback. And we have identified a number of organizations who work with our communities with disabilities. We'll have Jasmine and then Andrew.
There you go. I would like to make sure that when we're thinking about the way that we're doing outreach, we are not just thinking of, I guess you could say, like virtual ways of doing outreach. There's folks that don't have access to the internet. I think a great way to link that is when we're thinking about our houseless community. In addition to that, there are folks that are just not tech savvy. And so whether that's putting things out in the newspaper, putting things out via radio, but really just making sure that we are pushing this message and this need for input in many different channels. Far too often it's we do things online and really you end up really only finding folks that are in certain circles that end up participating. So we just really want to be mindful of the channels we're using.
Okay. Andrew?
Thank you. Agreed with all previous comments. And then I would really encourage that there's so many great groups that are presently represented. And I know that my organization included, we all have professional communicators that are potentially on staff. And I would really encourage that we convene those communicators so that they are connected to your work, the work of this this body, so that they are amplifying the message. And frankly, you always know what you don't know. And I don't know perfectly how to communicate. So I would say, let them really solve this big problem, because I think connecting with people on an infrastructure project of this scale is absolutely necessary. And let's put the professionals to work on that for us. So highly encourage setting a communicators table for all the various advisory groups.
Great suggestion. We have Jana, and then we will have Michaela.
Thank you. I think we need to be very clear about what our questions are. I've participated in a number of groups over the years. And without clarity of the questions, you're going to get information that may or may not be helpful to the project that you're working on. And I think there have been a couple of comments about using those of us that represent either community groups or business organizations to reach out into our network. So if we have something clear, some clear question, we can do that on behalf of this effort here as well. So that would be my suggestion.
Great. Thank you for that. Michaela?
I think my suggestion was just really reaching out to the young people in our community. I think that, you know, a lot of the people in this group and in a lot of like very vocal groups in particular tend to, you know, put forth a lot of effort to be involved in things like this. But I don't think that that doesn't mean that young people in high school, young professionals, people in college, like kids that go to Clark, like I just don't think that their voices are necessarily being heard in this conversation. And I think that they should be, because I think that they're the ones that are going to be living with the bridge for the next, you know, however many years. So I want people to want to come back to our community, and, you know, they go off to college, they go off to work, they do go off to the military, do whatever they do. But I want them to want to come back to this community and feel empowered to take a job in Portland because they love living in Vancouver and they want to move to Portland or work in Portland. And so just really engaging with young folks, I think will be really an important aspect.
Great. And sorry, I know there were a couple folks who we are unable to get to today, but please include your comments into the Jam board here. We will integrate all of this. We are still developing our community engagement strategies, and so this is super helpful. With that, Lynn, I'm turning it back over to you to proceed with our public comment.
Great, if I could get that slide put up, please. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move ahead. Next slide. This is time for public comment. We have set aside 10 minutes. We would ask that if you've joined by Zoom that you use the raise hand feature within the Zoom application. If you are calling in by telephone, press *9 to raise your hand. And one of our facilitators will be calling on you. You will receive an unmute request, and at that point you must accept it. And if you could provide your name and affiliation, we're going to divide the 10 minutes we have amongst the number of speakers, understanding that we will be giving 2 minutes to each. So if there's 3 speakers, it'll be 6 minutes. If there's more speakers than 5, we will be taking the first 5. If you are a person who wishes to make comment and time doesn't permit, we definitely want to encourage you to send those comments in. Those directions were provided at the beginning of the meeting and are available on the homepage of the Interstate Bridge. Oh, there we go. With that, I'm going to defer to one of our facilitators who will be calling on people to make public comment.
Lynn, our first raised hand is Mark Matney.
Good evening. My name is Mark Manti. Thank you to the co-chairs and advisory group members. I'm CEO of the Vancouver Clinic, which provides medical services to our region, almost 200,000 patients. I believe you received a letter from 7 business groups from across the metro region. Together, we encourage you to move quickly to replace the outdated and accident-prone I-5 bridge. The spans are 64 and 104 years old. They've served us well, but need a significant upgrade to meet modern transportation needs and safety standards. We support a replacement bridge that helps freight, commerce, and commuters moving in a predictable manner. This includes traffic lanes with safe shoulders, plus also bike and pedestrian access and high-capacity transit. For Vancouver Clinic, we certainly have staff living on both sides of the river, and we share many of the medical resources across the region. We view the I-5 bridge as a critical lifeline in our region. I really appreciate your attention and best wishes with your work.
Thank you. John Lee.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. John Lee, Southwest Washington concerned citizen. I was delighted to see the beginnings of discussions about the transportation needs for the bridge influence area and some of the information. I would suggest that instead of focusing on 130,000 daily trips, you look at the larger picture, which is over 300,000 daily trips, because it is a transportation network of both the 205 and the I-5 corridor. Furthermore, I am wondering when you are going to get into the details of what the transportation network needs will be in 2060 and in 2100. Yes, 80 years from now, because as Greg mentioned, this could be a 100-year-old bridge. We have seen the number of trips double in the last 40 years since the construction of the I-205 bridge, and therefore you are potentially looking at 500,000 trips potentially in 2060 and maybe 750 to a million daily trips in the year 2100. Is it best to try and plan for all of those trips down the I-5 corridor, or should you consider alternatives just like the I-205 corridor took some of the traffic and the heat and the pressure off of Interstate 5? Finally, I would love to have an in-depth discussion before the purpose and needs is decided so that we can discuss whether or not there really is a need for high capacity transit. Presently, in the era of COVID, there is almost zero need for any form of transit. And you can look at the data from C-Trans express bus lines that has fallen off a cliff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Sam Churchill. Okay, it looks like, Sam, your hand has gone down. So have you unmuted? Did you want to speak?
Okay, am I on?
You're on.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this outreach, and I live on Hayden Island, 3,000 people here under the bridge. And I really just have two words, Elon Musk. Let's look into that, okay? I mean, if Elon can deliver something for 1/10 the cost, isn't that something we should look into? I realize it's not helpful to ODOT. It's not helpful for the transit agencies, but I would like to see some analysis. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Lynn, that's all I see for hands raised for public comments at this point.
Thank you. Thank you to the committee. At this point, I would like to actually invite my co-chair, Ed Washington, to talk about the, sorry, I got distracted by the slide popping up. I would like to invite Ed Washington to wrap us up and talk about next steps.
Thank you, Lynn. First, before I go over the date of future meetings, I would just like to thank the public, everybody from the public that took time out of your late afternoon and hopefully listened to the meeting. Appreciate your comments, and thank you so very, very much for sharing this with us. Also, to all of the members of this committee that's here today, thank you all so very much for being here. And I think you can begin to get a sense of this thing is beginning to roll. We've got lots of work to do. A lot of things to get squared away. And also our speaker, Nolan, did I get that name correct? Nolan, thank you so very much for, thank everybody, but for me, Nolan, a picture is worth a million words. And I think you just gave us a beautiful, beautiful rendition of what can be. And so just want to let you know, CAG meeting number 3, it's going to be February 24th from 4 to 6. And CAG meeting number 4 will be March 10th from 4 to 6 p.m. And CAG meeting number 5 will be March 24th from 4 to 6 p.m. So I'm sure that by that time we will have gotten through all of the snow that we're going to get, and we'll be in the full throw of spring, and maybe we'll be able to get out a little bit more. So that's all I have to say. And it's just, and for everybody, just a wonderful, I think everybody did a great job. Really appreciate it. Okay.
Before I turn it over to Greg, I just want to echo Ed's comments about the visual. I'm highly confident that Ed is not the only person who found that visualization to just be so helpful. And I think it also explains the complexity of this project. Look at all of the different considerations and things that are interwoven into this project, historic, current, and future. So with that, Greg, I'd like you to provide any closing remarks.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Ed, for facilitating this group. And I am I'm constantly interested in all the things that are said, whether it's during public comment or the comments that this group is making. It helps inform us. It helps us make a better program. So please take some time and look at information that that you need to help drive this. The comment about the tunnel and trucks going through the tunnel, very, very timely comment that we will take into account as we move forward. But it's things like that, your lived experiences, that are going to help drive this program forward. So once again, thanks everybody for your time, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.